Welcome back to my channel. My name is Jodi Middendorf, and today I'm going to be talking about how I go about planning a canoe camping trip in the Boundary Waters in Minnesota. I think this video will be helpful to anybody specifically planning a Boundary Waters trip or somebody planning a trip in a different area, but the permitting and regulations will just be different if you're not going to be in the Boundary Waters and you're instead going to be somewhere else. But I think the bones of my explanation will be helpful, like I said, for anybody. I am going to specifically be planning a trip during this video that would be multiple nights with a group of people. This is hypothetical. If you go to this entry point on the dates that we talk about, you're not going to find me. I'm specifically choosing a date I know I won't be entering the Boundary Waters. I'm just coming up with dates and a location along with you. I honestly have no idea where I'm going to end up planning this trip in this video. We're going to kind of work together, and that way you can see how I go about planning even when I have no idea in mind. The first step that I would do is I would talk to my friends and see who wants to go, family members, who wants to go, and what dates are available. That's probably the most complicated part usually when I plan a trip, is finding out who actually wants to go and when we can make it work. Hypothetically, for this situation, we're gonna say that everybody can enter the Boundary Waters on August 15th, and we will be in the Boundary Waters for 3 nights. Once I know who is going on the trip and the dates that we are able to be in the Boundary Waters, I can start looking at other things. I think entering the Boundary Waters on the 15th and exiting on the 18th is a great plan. I would still kind of want to let everybody know that there's probably going to be a buffer of about a day on either side, depending on how far away from the Boundary Waters you are. If you need to drive for an entire day and then spend a night somewhere closer to the Boundary Waters, or if you are going to just try to drive there the same day, then you wouldn't need the day of buffer, but most people don't live within a couple hours of the wilderness, so that's something to think of too. So now that I have the dates and the group members, I'm going to go ahead and pull up BWCA.com and the recreation.gov websites. I usually have both of those websites open at the same time. I'll even pull up a Google Maps page to be able to see if I want to look at businesses nearby, or if I want to just see how long it's going to take to get from my house to that entry point while I'm planning. Those are the 3 pages I will have open for sure when I'm doing this. I personally am going to start at bwca.com, and in order to see which lakes or entry points or what the quotas are, I will go to maps and entry points here at the top of the page, go to BWCA entry points, and then look at this list here. So this is going to tell us the entry number. There used to be a lot more emphasis, I believe, on like the entry point number 1 or entry point number 45. Now, mostly I hear the names. So entry point Trout Lake, or entering on the Little Indian Sioux River, or entering on Fall Lake. That's more used now, but sometimes you still need to have the number as well. The daily permit quota just tells us how many people can enter at that entry point specifically each day. Sometimes it will say that it will vary. Here, Fall Lake only varies by week, so it might be more people can enter a certain time of year, fewer people can enter a different time of year for whatever reason. Sometimes it's 1 permit this day, 2 permits tomorrow, 1 permit, 2 permits, and it kind of alters through the days. Because maybe 1 permit isn't a lot and 2 is too many for that entry point, so then they rotate back and forth. That's just something to look at when I'm planning a trip if I am booking really close to the date. So if I'm planning to go August 15th and I'm trying to book a permit August 10th, I probably am going to start off with looking at the places that have more daily permit quotas, because if it only has 1 daily permit quota, it's probably already booked. But I'll show you how to look to make sure it's possible, you know, that somebody cancels last minute. For this trip, let's go with Mudrow Lake. Mudrow Lake is a place that I camped last year. It's over kind of on the Ely side of the park. We're gonna click on Mudrow Lake and see currently what it looks like. Right now we're still months out from being August, so I'm assuming there will be some options to enter on the 15th. But I do want to look at this map, so I'm going to view the map and kind of see where it's at. So Mudrow Lake entry point is going to be right here. With this entry point, you actually portage, so it shows the entry point over here, entry point number 23. However, you actually park over here. Over here somewhere is the parking lot, and you park, I'll let this load. You park somewhere over here, and then, or maybe it's even over here, to be honest. And then you carry all of your gear on this portage over here. It's kind of like a grassy, kind of wet, muddy portage sometimes, but it's short and it's manageable. If you click here, you might actually be able to see a photo. So that's what it looks like. On BWCA.com, it's nice because you can click on a lot of the little points and see photos or just information about that area. So here you paddle this little creek and then you come out into Mudrow Lake. There's a point of interest here. This photo shows Mudrow Lake with beautiful fall colors. That's kind of cool. There's a campsite right here. I actually stayed at this campsite before. This one doesn't have photos. Sometimes you can actually see the photos of the campsite. Anyway, we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves. I'm going to hop over to recreation.gov now that I've fallen in love with this entry point. I know I would love to go here, portage into other lakes. Looks like it'd be fun. We have some options. We could portage elsewhere, or we could do a really simple trip and just hang out on Mudrow Lake, depending on what you're looking for. I see that it looks viable. This looks like something I would maybe want to do, and I just picked it at random. One thing about choosing an entry point, for myself personally, I usually like to do something a little bit newer each year and then also revisit some other places that I've been to and I loved, because I do multiple trips per year. If I'm planning a trip of somewhere that I haven't been before, I might do a little bit more research and find out specifically, like, where do I want to go new this year? Why do I want to do it? Do I want to do a tough portage? Do I want to do an easy portage? Who's in my group? If I am bringing my grandpa and he doesn't want to walk far, I'm probably not going to choose an entry point with a long portage. There are some places where you enter the Boundary Waters and you park really close to the lake. You can like drive your car up, unload, and then go park it. This one, again, there's that little portage. This is an easy one, but sometimes you have to portage miles just to get to your first lake. So keep that in mind when you're choosing where you want to book, where you want to go into the Boundary Waters. And use these maps as a guide. So if I looked here and saw that there was a portage and decided I didn't want to do that, I would just go back to the page that I was on originally and just pick a different one maybe and look it up. This can be a little bit tedious and time consuming, but you get used to using these maps and looking through it, and eventually if you spend enough time on the website, you kind of have an idea of which lakes are where and which ones might be easier to access than others. If you really just want advice from somebody, you can always call an outfitter and ask them what they recommend for new trip people too. We'll talk more about outfitters in a little bit. So now I've decided I maybe want to go to Mudrow Lake. I'll head over to recreation.gov. You can sign in, but for the purpose of this video, we're just gonna go right into permits. For Boundary Waters permits, you're just gonna click right here. That is going to open us up a new page, and Boundary Waters currently is the second one on this tab, so click there. Now that we're on the Boundary Waters page, we're actually going to explore available permits. This is going to give us an idea of what's still available as of right now. This is going to change daily as people book permits. Select permit type. I'm going to do an overnight paddle. There's also other options like overnight hike, overnight motor, or day use motor, things like that. We're just going to do overnight. We're gonna have 3 nights there, so that's what we want to do. When you book to enter on Mudrow Lake, that doesn't mean you have to stay on Mudrow Lake. There are some permits that say if you enter on Sag Lake, for example, you can only camp and be on Sag Lake. You can't camp on a different lake. You maybe can go there for the day, but you can't camp elsewhere. With Mudrow Lake, for this permit, I can go to other lakes. I don't have to book a permit for Mudrow Lake and every other lake I want to visit. You just book the permit for Mudrow Lake, because that's where you're entering. It's just an entry point. This is where I'm gonna go into the Boundary Waters on this specific day to this specific entry point location. Once you book your permit, you can't change where you want to enter or change the date. You would have to cancel the permit and then buy a new permit. You get like usually a partial refund if you cancel your permit, but you do lose a part of it. The permit cost is going to be dependent on how many people are going in your trip. I think you can adjust the number of people that you're going to bring on your trip all the way up until like the day of the trip. But you just can't go over the 9-person per group quota and then the 4 watercraft per group. So 4 canoes or 2 canoes, 2 kayaks, whatever you want to do that way. Pets don't count as group members, but children do. So we are now on the recreation.gov website for overnight paddle. We are looking at May 1st to May 10th. So you can go through and look, and you can see that in even May 31st to June 9th, there are some entry points that have 0 entry points left, even though we're still, like, the Boundary Waters hasn't even opened. It's February. The Boundary Waters opens in May. So it's good to book your permits as early as possible. The permits go on sale in the end of January, and some of the days sell out the first day that permits open. So booking ahead of time is definitely beneficial, but if you book like 2 days before your trip, you're probably gonna find something, someplace where you can enter the Boundary Waters. You're just not gonna have a lot of options on where you enter the Boundary Waters. So we're gonna go all the way to August. We wanna enter August 15th, which is apparently a Tuesday. And you can just look down here for the entry point that you want to use. And it's separated by districts. So these are all the Gunflint area, the Gunflint Trail area. Now we're in Kawishawee, and that's where we're gonna find Mudrow Lake. Mudrow Lake, it looks like there are 0 available permits. So that's kind of a bummer. Now that we're here on the recreation.gov website and I see that there are no permits available, I might just look here as well to see where I want to go, because I can tell that some of these locations are just already booked. Moose Lake is a great option, and you can tell there are just a lot of options for people to go there because the permit quotas are high. There's a lot of campsites on that lake. It's a large lake. But maybe I don't want to be on such a big lake, so I can look around and I can see all of the lakes in this similar area. I'm going to go ahead and go with Angleworm Lake. I know the Angleworm Lake entry point has about a 2-mile portage just to get from the parking lot to the lake. And I think that my group might think that that is really fun. So moving forward, we're going to stick with Angleworm Lake. Entry point, and there's probably 2 permits left for that lake out of the 2 that they have available, because people don't probably want to portage 2 miles to get to their first lake, but we're going to do that. So I'm going to click Angleworm Lake for Tuesday, August 15th. You don't have to click like every day through the 18th. You only have to book for the day that you're entering, like I said. If we go book now, it wants me to log in. We're going to go ahead and log in. If I go book now, you have 15 minutes to complete the order before the reservation it's just going to pop back in and repopulate for somebody else to book. So you would go through and you would choose where you want to get your permit from. You pick up your permit in person the day before or the day of. So I can pick up my permit August 14th or August 15th, and I'm going to look here and see where I want to pick it up from. It will let you choose for example, Nor'Wester Lodge and Canoe Outfitters, even though that is very far away from Angleworm Lake. So you want to do some research. It will let you pick a bad decision. You have to know where you want to go. So this is where I might go to Google Maps. You can also go back to, BWCA .com, and there are ways that you can look up outfitters, but I'm just going to go to Google Maps. and I'm going to search Angleworm Lake MN. This is Angleworm Lake. And the trail starts here. It is a hiking trail, but that's also the portage to get there, so that's where you'll be walking this whole distance. I want to see what is near there. I can see Lodge of Whispering Pines, Big Lake Wilderness Lodge. Those don't sound like outfitters. I can see Ely is really close on here, so I might zoom in, and I'm going to be driving through Ely to get there anyways, and I know that. I see Ely Outfitting Company. There are lots of outfitting companies in Ely. There is Paragus, Spirit of the Wilderness. There's a lot of options. You can also go to a forest or ranger station usually and pick up your permits there. For the sake of this video, let's just randomly pick Spirit of the Wilderness. I don't think I've been there, but I see it every time I drive through, and I just am a creature of habit, so I kind of go to similar places, but I'm sure they're great. So we're going to go with that, Spirit of the Wilderness. That's what we're going to go with. I know that that's an outfitter. And I'm back at recreation.gov. I'm going to look for Spirit of the Wilderness. Canoe Outfitters, and it tells you Kawishwe District, so I'm going to be like, okay, I'm pretty sure that's the right one. Book that. If you end up not being able to pick up your permit there and pick it up somewhere else, you can usually change that and it's just fine, but choose the best one that you can come up with. So now I'm going to look over here, overnight paddle, entry point date, August 15th. I don't have an exit date yet. You could stay in the Boundary Waters for like as long as you want. The permit is just to get you in, but they like to know how long you'll be in there, so you would fill in your personal information, and then down underneath your personal information, you would put your exit date that you expect. I expect to leave August 18th. I expect to exit at the same location. You can enter the Boundary Waters in one location and then paddle through different lakes and exit at a different entry point and turn that entry point into your exit point. But I'm just gonna paddle in from Angleworm Lake and then portage back out to the same spot. So my exit point is also going to be in Angleworm Lake. Total of 4 days, 3 nights. Group members, you're going to add however many group members you want. Let's say my group is 4. You're going to put their name, last name, and then if they're an adult or not. I'm going to keep myself as the group leader because I really want to go on this trip, and the group leader, whoever books the permit as the group leader, must be the person that will pick up the permit, and they must remain in the Boundary Waters for the duration of the trip. You can have an alternate group leader as well, but you only get those 2 people, so if you have 9 people and the group leader and the alternate group leader find out that they can't go last minute, nobody can go, or you can rebook a permit. Then you go to proceed to checkout. Over here it shows 4 adults for a total of $64. User fee deposit, nothing. Reservation fee $6. So when I have canceled my permits in the past, for whatever reason I realized I couldn't go on the trip, usually you get your fee, your adult fee or child fee back. You don't get your reservation fee back. Also, if you book just for 1 person, it's going to charge you for 2 adults automatically, and I have been refunded for the 1 extra adult when I actually pick up the permit, if that makes sense. So then you would proceed to check out and to get your permit. One cautionary thing is when you are looking at the permits, you have your permit in your basket, or you're kind of still looking at permits. If you plan to outfit a canoe, rent a canoe from an outfitter, or outfit completely, or work with a guide, you want to pause before you pay for the permit. I guess there are some instances when you would want to buy the permit and just hope for the best. If you really know you can only go on August 15th and no other date, and you really want to go to one location, I mean, go ahead and buy the permit and then talk to the outfitter or then talk to a guide, but there's no guarantee that the outfitter is going to have those dates available with canoes. They might have already rented out everything for that week or weekend. Guides are usually booked well in advance, sometimes up to a year in advance. You could book the permit and just risk the money that you wouldn't get refunded if you want to, but in a good situation, in an ideal situation, you talk to an outfitter and a guide once you realize that the dates and locations that you want are viable options. If you talk to a guide prior to January when the permits go on sale, you probably have a better chance of making sure that the guide is available that time or the outfitter is available that time. They might tell you, hey, look, wait until January whatever or February whatever to book with us, but I would call as soon as possible. In this case, it is February and I'm booking for August, so I would probably pause before I buy the permit myself and call an outfitter and see if they want me to buy it, or if they buy it as part of the package, if they purchase the permit for you and make sure everything is correct. I don't know how often that happens. They might just ask you to book the permit yourself, but I would just make sure that you are gonna be able to outfit the canoes, rent the gear, the canoes, whatever you need before you book the permit. In my case, I'm not gonna be outfitting anything, likely. I'm gonna use all of my own gear, so I'm gonna go ahead and book this permit, proceed to checkout, pay for it, and then now that I have my permit booked, my location chosen, I'm going to Angleworm Lake August 15th through 18th with a group of 4 people. Now I am going to go back to BWCA.com and do like the fun part of planning for me. I will go back to Angleworm Lake, which is up here. This is entry point 20. I'm gonna see, wow, how long is this portage to the lake and how treacherous is it? Sometimes people will actually put comments on here, so I'll click on the portage line, view portage detail or post information. Somebody commented, this portage is a doozy, especially doing it your first day fully loaded. Somebody commented, did 2 trips entering at entry point 20 this year, long portage for sure, but not rough. Boardwalk is in poor condition, will need replacing soon. Single portaged, all 4 legs, 57 to 75 minutes. So you can see a photo of this portage in the winter, a photo of where this is probably in the parking lot right before you start the portage, and read up on that. So that's what I really like about BWCA.com, is it really kind of gets you excited for your trip because you can click on stuff and see photos. I will say that just because it's really hard for somebody else to portage doesn't mean it's going to be as hard for you, or just because somebody else says it's really easy doesn't mean it's always going to be easy for you. So take all of these comments with a grain of salt, especially if somebody says that this is kind of easy or whatever. Usually the people commenting on here are like experts. They're not novices going on BWCA.com usually and like writing these posts. They're usually people who've done it a lot. Keep that in mind. Over here you can see how many campsites are on Angleworm Lake. The red dots are campsites, so you can actually click on it. This one has an average rating of 4. I wouldn't take the rating to heart either. I've been to campsites that were rated a 1, which is really poor, and I loved the campsite. So it's kind of personal preference and what you're looking for and who you're camping with and what the weather ends up being like. One campsite that's horrible in the rain might be awesome in the sun, or it may be really bad and buggy one time of the year, but not when you're going, so keep that in mind. Angleworm Lake does have a lot of pretty campsites, I know this, but you can look through at different photos of the campsite and you can see what year it was taken. So this photo's from 2007, so maybe it doesn't look the same anymore, who knows. But I like to look through and kind of see how many campsites there are, where I want to go, where I want to portage to. Maybe I'll portage up to Home Lake, or maybe I'll portage even up to Gull Lake if we're going to be there for a few days. Sometimes I'll even just set up camp on one lake and stay there the whole time. That's base camping. So this is something that you'll want to talk to your group about. Maybe have everybody pull up BWCA.com, look at the lake you're going to be entering, and decide what they want their camping trip to look like. Again though, you can't guarantee it, because when you book a permit for the Boundary Waters, you're not booking a specific campsite. You can't book and claim, hey, I want this campsite right here on this point. There might just be somebody there. You have to be a little bit flexible. So you might show up and realize that all of the campsites on this lake are taken and you actually have to portage again. That's kind of how it goes. That's kind of the joy of the Boundary Waters. You don't know exactly what's going to happen or how it's going to go. Every trip looks a little bit different, even if you go to the same lake as you've been to before. I personally, tips that I have when looking at lakes and coming up with like my ideal trip, I like to kind of dream about what campsite I want and why. So when we get to the lake, that's where we look first. And then if those are taken, then we look at other campsites, and that's fine too. I like to first look at campsites that are gonna have really nice sunsets. I always like getting up early at home. I get up at like before the sun most days. When I'm camping, I tend to sleep in more. So having a sunset campsite tends to be more of a joy for me than a sunrise campsite. So I will come up with a route. So for example, this camping trip that we're taking, I'm going to come up with kind of an itinerary of what I expect the trip to look like. Again, you can never know for sure. And I'm gonna actually write down. I'm gonna write down what lake I'm going to, what entry point number, which company I am working with for permits, outfitting, or guiding, what the expected route is. I might expect to enter into Angleworm Lake and then portage up to Home Lake, camp there for the first 2 nights, and then portage up into Gull Lake, camp there for a night, and then on the last days, just slowly make my way back through Angleworm Lake and then get on that portage and come back. I will write this down, and I will say that I will also write down, if weather permits, I will exit this day. If the weather's really windy, I probably won't paddle back, because especially if you're on a big lake, a wide lake, and wind is really ripping, sometimes it's safer just to stay in the Boundary Waters an extra day than it is to try and exit. So I'll write that down too. I'll have like a full itinerary and my phone number and the phone number of everybody in the group, and I will make a couple copies of that, and everybody in the group will give that to like their contact, their point of contact. So if something happens and we don't exit on the 18th, maybe there's poor weather, they can look at that and be like, okay, well, I do see in the weather that the forecast for Ely, Minnesota is like 50-mile-per-hour winds today, so they're probably not gonna exit today. They're probably gonna stay an extra day. They might call an outfitter, the outfitter that you're working with, and see if the outfitter has heard anything from you, or if other people are delaying their exit due to weather, and that might calm some nerves. And then if you exit the Boundary Waters on time, you can text them, let them know, we're out of the Boundary Waters, we're on our way home, and things like that. It's just always a good idea, whether you're doing Boundary Waters or any camping or hiking or anything, just let somebody know where you're going, what you're doing, what the ideal plan is, and then try to stick to that plan. And I actually have this information in my How to BWCA book that I'm linking in the description. I have like an itinerary in the appendix to fill all that out and give it to somebody. I also have a pre-trip checklist in my book that you can check off, like we have purchased and planned our meals, we have booked our permits, we have booked accommodations for the night before, either at an outfitter or at a different location. We have set up and practiced using our gear for the trip. All of these things are on a checklist and more, just to make you feel more assured. I don't want this to be overwhelming. I know that it can be a little overwhelming planning any trip that you are unfamiliar with, especially in the wilderness. That's why I'm making these videos. That's why I'm sharing this information. If you feel that even after hearing all of this and learning all of the things from the internet, that it's just kind of overwhelming planning a trip, I definitely encourage you to reach out to an outfitter. The outfitters can talk through trip plans, like easier trip plans or more difficult trip plans. They can outfit you with all of the gear and even all of the food sometimes that you'll need for your trip. They can offer advice. They're the people who, when you come to pick up your permit, they might be like, look, it's really windy out there. Like, what's your plan for today? Maybe just stay on the first lake, or maybe it's not a good idea and let's see if we can find you a different permit for tomorrow. Outfitters can really help. If you want to book a guide, like I said earlier in the video, book as soon as possible. There are fishing guides, there are day trip guides, there are overnight guides, there are guides that will go for a week. They tend to book up though. There aren't usually enough guides for the need, and that's also can be really expensive. If you want more information or want access to the guidebook I've put together, I have a lot more resources on my YouTube channel. The guide will be in the description of the video. I do answer a lot of questions too in other YouTube videos. I will be putting out an updated gear packing list, what I'm using, what I pack, what I've used in the past versus the future, things like that in just a couple of months here. I love the community we're building and I love sharing these things. So if you're subscribed, you'll be able to probably be notified of future videos like that, and just kind of be a part of this outdoor community that we're building. Another resource that's really helpful is this book here. You can find Angleworm Lake in here, and you can read about the portage, about different routes around Angleworm Lake or any lake that you want to go to in the Boundary Waters. This author does a really, really good job of describing different routes and what it's like. This is just how I go about planning my Boundary Waters trips. I'm sure other people do it differently. If you plan your trips completely differently than how I laid out my way of doing it, let us know in the comments. I'd love to hear how you plan it as well.